All right, welcome. I'm Katie Gorka, the Executive Director of the Westminster Institute. The Westminster Institute was the sponsor of this delegation that went to Egypt. They arrived on Friday. They had 2 very intensive days of meetings, which they will tell you about. The Westminster Institute, for those of you who do not know it, is a nonprofit think tank based in McLean, Egypt, Virginia, is pivotal to the United States, as well as to the Middle East and the Arab world. So I'm very grateful for the extraordinary experts who went over there. I think that they really deserve credit for the boot camp they've just been through, the travel. I don't even think they were allowed to sleep while they were there. And with that, I'm just going to introduce General Vallely.
Well, good morning, everybody. I'm glad to see none of you have been furloughed or signed your furloughed papers like Dr. Gorka. So the government is shut down, but here we are. We're still existing and breathing and so on. Well, we left Cairo.
Well, again, echoing the words, thank you, Katie, for arranging this. This was an amazing trip. It was a little more fast-paced than I would have chosen, but I don't. Fortunately, I had been to Egypt before because we didn't even get to see the pyramids. Now, how can you go to Egypt and not see the pyramids? I kept saying that take them by the pyramids, take them by the pyramids, and it was probably one of the best trips I've ever had to the region. I lived there, and I've talked to leaders from all over. But the level of access that we had was astounding. But there was a common thread throughout all of the meetings, and I joked. I told the general, I think they've all gotten their talking points from Egypt Central, because it was always the same thing in every meeting. We need political support. We need you not to judge us through your eyes. You need to look at this from an Egyptian sense. And the general and I gave, I think, a pretty good interview to Egyptian television, very penetrating questions about America's actions. And we turned a lot of that back, and this is, why is the United States supporting the Muslim Brotherhood? And we said, well, why'd you elect them? Let's start with that. And so let's not, this is not our fault. This is something that you're trying to correct, and we want to work with you. I think one of the things that they are looking at and they're taking very seriously is their role in the region and in the Arab world, the Muslim world, because as you know, Egypt, I consider it the heart of the Arab world. It is the biggest country. It's probably the most important. They've got the best armed forces. They also have, El Azhar is there, the kind of the center of Sunni Islam. And also the Coptic Pope, who was actually very charming, by the way, in the face of what he is facing. 85 churches burned, 1,000 homes of Christians burned. And we don't always see the 1,000 homes of Christians burned. We see the churches, and talking about that. And despite all that, the hope that all of these people have that they're going to be able to fix this. I think maybe they're being a little naive. I think Umra Musa was probably the only one that doesn't have a really naive. I think he understands, because I asked him, I said, the perception in the United States is that Egypt is not out of the woods. We don't know if this is going to work. You're not going to get foreign investment. The tourists aren't going to come back. I'm trying to remember the numbers. Correct me if I'm wrong, sir, but the tourism on the one company they would deal with, this one company we talked to the president, and he said he had a big company. He said they were bringing in $9 million a month prior to the revolution. This month he took in, what was it, 100,000. Now you do the math. And he's got a whole staff he's got to feed. So and they said we need the roadmap. The roadmap being the Constitution, the elections, the new government, and then everything will be swell, and then all the tourists will come back and all the foreign investment will come. I said it's not that easy, and Egypt doesn't live in a vacuum, and there are pressures from the outside that you need to deal with. And we talked a lot about Libya. They're very concerned about what's going on in Libya. A lot of the arms at the Muslim Brotherhood, the MBs as they call them, that's one word there, MB, MB, even in Arabic, and they call them the MBs, and they said they're getting all these weapons from Libya. There's just a pipeline coming through there. They're very concerned about what's going on in Syria. They're very, I think they're kind of incredulous as to our policies toward the region. not only toward them in Egypt, but what we're doing in the rest of the world or what we're not doing. And I think a recurring theme was, and whether it's true or not, it's their perception, is you are the remaining superpower. You need to be doing something. Not necessarily what we should do, but we need to be doing something to address these issues in the region. They were very concerned about it. So they said that, they realize how important Egypt is to this part of the world. They wonder if we know how important Egypt is to this part of the world. And it was very telling. I did play devil's advocate quite a bit of the time, and in both languages, because you have to do it both so they understand what you're saying. And the military coup thing, and they said, here's the answer. Here's what you can tell your government. It was not a coup. It was the people rising up. I said, and General Sisi telling the army not to intervene, that might constitute a coup. And they were nuancing it out. And I understand what they're doing. But it was, I think, illustrative. It was fascinating. And I'd be happy to share, in response to any specific things you want. But I think we all came away with the same feeling. I think the Egyptians are more united in this than we might think. Of course, that being said, we did talk to most people that shared the same view. We did not have access to the Muslim Brotherhood. We were not able to arrange that. But I think we would probably gotten a whole different perspective. And one thing, as you drive through the streets of Egypt, I can read the graffiti. And I'm a graffitiologist, I guess. Everywhere I go, I read the graffiti because I think there's a lot of truth in graffiti. And so I would translate, as we were driving by, what some of the graffiti was saying. There's still a lot of Muslim Brotherhood support on the streets, a lot. And they come around every night and repaint over they paint it out, and the next day it's there again. So there's still people there. They're still willing to fight. So Egypt is not out of the woods. And while we were there, there was a summit going on about foreign investment. So they know that this is critical. They also know that they're not going to get foreign investment until they figure out, until they get a government in place. And this is going to take a year. Right. So their biggest concern is, how do we bridge that gap for that 1 year? And they're as the general said, they're relying on the Gulf. Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, whoever, somebody to come in there and provide them some funding, because they know they're not going to get it from the West.
That's their lifeline.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Next question. I would say yes. That's why that border there is very important, and they have secured it. And the intelligence over there, they're watching that border. At least that was my perception.
As best they can. It's 1,000 kilometers long. And they've got very limited resources out there to secure it. They're doing the best they can, using aircraft and such. But it's a real problem, and they mentioned that over and over.
The other was the aircraft, Rick. What was it? They're going back to the F-4s. And the parts, and then going back and keeping the MiG-21s.
Yeah, they've been forced into this situation now where with the stopping of the delivery of F-16 parts, that stops their modernization. They still have got about 48% of the Russian stuff, the East Bloc stuff. And what they've been doing is taking the F-4s out. The F-4s are gone out of service because they're too expensive to maintain commercially. There's no longer U.S. government parts for the things. So they were trying to. They can do less. They can do more with less F-16s. Replace those. But now they're having trouble doing that. And the same thing with the Apaches. They're having to cut back some of the operations in the Sinai because of the maintenance issues with the Apache. So they're using MiG-21s now. God, I remember MiG-21s when I was 19 years old.
Because they can get the parts out of the Ukraine.
Yeah,
right?
you can get parts for them.
By the way,
I think it also empowered the people. I think they felt comfortable going out into the streets because they have that trust of the army. And General Sisi made this point several times. He said the Egyptian army has never fired on Egyptian civilians, and they never will. Now, whether that's true or not, you could argue, but that's their feeling, and that's generally the perception we got from the people, that the army was probably the most trusted institution in the country. The only other place I've seen, the closeness between the army and the people is Turkey has that same thing, that same feeling. and of course the Israelis, as you said. But I'd worked with these Arab militaries before, but I had forgotten how close the Egyptian army is to the people. And the perception problem that the Egyptians have, and they've not done a very good job explaining it. And I think, Sebastian, that was the best explanation I've ever heard of why it wasn't a coup. But I could sit over there all day, and I did this. Tell me why it's not a coup. And they nuance it, but they're not doing a good job selling it.
Right.
Yeah. Jenny?
And it's not for us to say when it should occur.
If I could just add to that, the Egyptian army is not a monolithic organization. They're not all good guys. There is an element of the Muslim Brotherhood in the Egyptian army, even in the officer corps. And General Sisi knows that, and he did ask us for that one thing. He said, "I need time to fix this." Unfortunately, in that period of time, you're going to have violence like that directed against the Copts. And the Pope was, you could see he was visibly, when he talked about this, visibly moved and shaken. I don't have an answer as what the solution is, but I mean, they're aware of it, but they know they need time. And, the Egyptian army, for as good as it is, does have some bad elements in it.